I have a confession. I'm probably the least sporty person you're ever likely to meet. Much to my father's lament, I don't like playing, and I don't even like watching sport. But what I am interested in is, beyond physical fitness, is what makes a great athlete. Why do some sports professionals rise to the occasion, while others just crumble under pressure? And do the lessons from sport transfer to other areas of life, such as business or even parenting? With me to discuss the psychology of sport is Dr. Jim Taylor. Jim holds a PhD in psychology. He's written 18 books, including The Complete Guide to Cycling Psychology and Train Your Mind for Athletic Success. And he's the co-founder of Mindto, a startup developing an app that empowers athlete performance, well-being, and mental health. Hello, Jim.
Good morning, good afternoon, Paul. Great to be here. I love chatting it up, talking shop, talking psychology with people who are equally passionate about psychology.
Exactly. Let's do that then. Let's start. What's your story? How did you start off down that path of having a career in sports psychology?
Yeah, well, there's a perspective that people become psychologists to figure themselves out. And that was definitely the case with me. I was an alpine ski racer in my youth, and I was okay. But my head, I was known as a mind job or a head case, where my mind got in the way of my skiing my fastest. And so they didn't really have sports psychologists back then or mental coaches, but I took this summer course related to everything I do with athletes. In terms of helping them perform better. And I applied it to my ski racing. And the next year I took a quantum leap. I made the bottom of the U.S. ski team. I competed against the best in the world. And I had amazing results compared to the year before. But what amazed me most was the change in my psychology that produced those results. And so when I got to college, I, like everybody else, took Psych 101. And the way I put it is that I didn't choose psychology, it chose me. And ever since then, I've been on this journey of exploring the mind, initially in sport, but as you intimate in your introduction, everything I talk about, for example, related to sport, it relates to life. And for me, performance is performance. I don't care whether it's, again, I work with athletes, business people, surgeons, performing artists. There's some differences around the edges, but the fundamental core of performing your best, of creating a sense of well-being and mental health, that applies across the board, because it's not ski racing psychology or sports psychology or corporate psychology. It's life.
And that's what interested me in this, because I think anyone who knows me, as I mentioned in the introduction, why am I reading a book on the cycling psychology? And I was sat in a cafe somewhere and a friend came up and said, sorry, is somebody given you that? What are you doing? But right in the introduction, it's wonderfully put that you say, yes, we are talking about the subject of cycling, but it's more than that. It's life. It's everything else. And it's that mental training, which when I read it and went through it, I saw so many overlaps with the behavior work that I do. But I think let's start at the beginning for listeners and start at the basics. In your view, what percentage of athlete success is mental versus the physical?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, Paul, because when I first work with an athlete individually, or I give a talk to a group, I always ask this question: how important is the mental side of sport compared to the physical and technical side? And very few say less important. Reasonably, the majority probably say as important, but a large number say more important. And again, given what I do for a living, I love it when they say that. But I don't even think that it's more important, because you can have all the mental stuff in the world, but if you're not physically and technically capable of executing your sport, the mental side doesn't matter. But it is an essential piece of the puzzle that is neglected, because you think about the highest level of any sport. They're all genetic freaks. They're all incredibly physically fit. They all have the best technical skills and tactical skills. They all have the best sports science, the best data, the best coaching, the best nutrition. So on any given day, what separates those who win from those who don't? By pure elimination, it's often the mental side. And so the challenge then is that everybody says it's so important. And this is the contradiction, that everybody thinks it's so important. And yet if I then ask how much time is devoted to it. So a typical an elite athlete, I mean, they can train in 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And for young athletes, it might be 1 or 2. But then I ask, how many hours do you devote each week to mental training? And there's a lot of hems and haws and ums, and it's sort of a rhetorical question because the answer is largely 0. Because one way I put it is that all athletes do mental stuff. They do things to motivate themselves, to stay positive, to relax, to focus, to deal with their emotions. But mental stuff is not mental training, just like going into the gym every 3 weeks and doing arm curls is not conditioning. And so one of my major goals in my career has been, to varying degrees of success, I will admit, is getting athletes and coaches and parents to see that mental training needs to be approached the same way as physical training. And if I may continue very briefly, the question then is, why is this major disconnect between importance and effort or time put into it? And here's my thinking. On the physical side, either or technical side, on the field, the court, the course, the rink, the hill, the track, whatever the venue is, it's very tangible. You can see it, you can touch it, you can measure it, you can feel it. So it's easy for athletes to wrap their arms around. Oh yeah, if I go into the gym and on a consistent training program, I'm going to get stronger, and that'll make me a better athlete. The problem is that the mind, as you well know, is not tangible. It's like grasping onto fog. And you can't literally or metaphorically wrap your arms around something that's intangible. So a lot of my work involves making the intangible tangible.
Yes.
And Paul, I'm a word guy, and I believe words are one way we can make the intangible tangible. For example, I talk about mental training. Athletes can relate to training. I talk about the mind is made up of muscles. Athletes can appreciate muscles. They can be weak, they can be strong, they can be injured, but for sure they need to be exercised if they want to be really strong. And then I talk about mental tools. A hammer, tangible. A screwdriver, a drill, tangible. And so the more you can give, because people can't talk about things they don't have vocabulary for.
Yeah. So you're overlapping unusual concepts onto familiar concepts so they can just go, I see what you're saying. It's like that. And I know what that is in another area of my life.
Exactly. And also there is still a stigma around psychology. So even if it's sports psychology, and that's why I don't call it sports psychology, I call it mental training, because it's like, you wouldn't believe the number of calls I get once someone has a problem. Now, you don't wait to get injured to do conditioning. Why would you wait to get mentally injured to do mental training?
That surprises me a little. I suppose, going back to what you were saying, how things have changed and the athletes you see today are absolute, like you say, huge people. So I'm thinking of rugby, for instance. When I was growing up, the rugby players were big people, but they weren't toned people. They were just large gentlemen, really. Nowadays, they are like all Jack Reachers. They're all sort of very toned, buff men. And so that's progressed on. Now, what surprised me about the mental side is, in the world we're living in, especially over the last decade, the awareness of mental health, mental conditions, the importance of that, I would have thought that actually that would have made people more open to the mental health training aspect of things.
Yeah, and it has to a degree. So probably in the last decade, a lot of very famous, successful athletes like Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, Michael Phelps, Noah Lyles, the list goes on, have come forward and said, I'm struggling mentally and emotionally. And to a degree, that's been an inflection point in two ways. At an individual level, a young athlete, a 16-year-old athlete, looks up at their heroes and go, oh my gosh, he's struggling or she's struggling. Maybe I can too. They're getting help. Maybe I can too. And they've been very open about seeking mental help. Noah Lyles talks, the sprinter, talks about working with his mental coach, his therapist all the time. And so that's made it more, young athletes and families, parents have been more receptive to that. At an institutional level, millions of dollars have been poured into at professional teams and universities. In the US, where sports obviously is a very big deal, pouring resources into the psychological aspect of sport, not only performance, but also well-being as well as mental health. And
Yes.
so we're seeing some of that, but still the numbers are daunting. For example, I was just talking to the head of sort of life psychology at an Ivy League school in back east, and they have, I think, 3 sports psychologists on staff. Do you know how many athletes they have in their athletic department? Take a guess.
Hundreds?
950.
Okay, so 3 to 950.
So the numbers don't work. So there's still a disconnect because yes, there is a psychoeducational component to what we do, and it's largely what I do. And just disclaimer: I have a PhD in psychology. I have clinical training, but I don't practice clinical psychology. I don't do mental illness. I respect those who do. It's never been an interest of mine. But I do mental health and I do well-being as well as performance because they go hand in hand. A mentally
Of
healthy
course.
athlete is going to be a better performer, and they're going to stay in the sport longer. And so there is movement, but I've been in this field for decades, and every 5 years or so, I say, oh, in the next 5 years, every youth program, every sport, every professional collegiate program is going to have a full-time sports psychologist or mental coach on staff. But I've been saying that every 5 years for many 5 years. And it's a big sticking point in our field because there are many people coming out with graduate degrees in sports psychology or mental training, and there are no jobs.
Okay.
And the other part of that is that yes, at the higher levels of sport where there is money, there's movement, there's some traction. But at youth sport level, it's largely non-existent or not well executed. So I work with youth programs all over the country in Europe, and nobody's figured out how to deliver it. And I don't mean this to be a commercial for our new app, but Mindto is designed to fill that space, meaning to educate athletes and coaches and parents in a way that meets them where they are in the digital age, meaning on their phones, on the go.
I just want to sort of circle back to, you mentioned, I guess, alongside the mental training and support is the need for support with families and coaches. So I suppose, do you see more people moving towards mental coaching and even families understanding that that's part of the need for their child who is excelling at their sport?
Yeah, for sure. There is movement in that direction, but it's still not seen as a proactive, preventive, strengthening approach. It's more like my kid is struggling. Let's call Dr. Jim Taylor or whoever. And that can have benefits, but again, it goes back to my metaphor of you don't wait to get injured physically to go to a conditioning coach. So
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
certainly there is a lot of interest. And when I give talks, I do a lot of parent talks. I do a lot of parent education too, because I've written 5 of the books that I've written are parenting books. And so there's definitely interest, but there's not yet complete buy-in. Let's put it this way: within the ecosystem, within the culture of sport, and especially youth sport, the mental side is not seen as an integral part yet. And plus, there's the issue of time and money. Youth sports don't have a lot of time and a lot of money to bring the right people in. So there are a lot of barriers as well as opportunities.
Yeah, okay. And you mentioned one of the reasons you feel that the mental side of it is not as caught up yet, the physical side, is that lack of a tangible reinforcement. I always think in terms of that behavioristic side of getting reinforcement to continue the behavior. So let's give some reinforcement to those who may be not considering that mental health side. Can you share an example of a success story where your work with an individual in their mental training has helped them move through to a level which they couldn't have done without you?
So I'll tell the story and sort of mirror along. So athletes are doers. They want stuff to do to get better. So part of the tangible aspect is I give them stuff to do to get better. So again, working with this one athlete who became an Olympic champion, she's obviously phenomenally gifted. You don't get that far if you're not a genetic freak, work hard, and are also who isn't already pretty darn good mentally.
Yeah.
And so think about this: is you take an athlete, a 16-year-old in any sport, I can do pretty much anything with them, and they're going to get better because there's all this room for growth. But if you think about an athlete who's already one of the top athletes in the world, they're here 99.5%. And this has been one of the great challenges when I work with athletes at this level is what can I possibly do to take them that 0.5% that gets them to the very top?
Yes.
And so a lot of it is doing stuff, whether it's mental imagery / visualization, the most powerful mental tool in sport.
Okay, go on. Tell me a bit more about that.
Oh my gosh, we could spend an hour just talking about mental imagery. But I'm sure you're aware of the research that shows that simply imagining yourself performing can help you psychologically. It's motivating. It builds confidence because you're getting positive, successful reps, even though it's in your mind. It's a way to manage your physiological intensity, whether up or down.
Yes.
It's a way to stay focused. The simple act of imagining yourself performing takes focus because it's easy to drift back and forth. It's also a way you can train emotions. And emotions are a huge part of my work. So, the research is very clear, though, that imagery is not just a mental thing. It's not just picturing stuff in your head. It actually triggers your motor programs. So there's good research that shows you can actually improve technically just by doing imagery. And if you combine it with actual physical practice, you get better faster.
Yes.
Routines, pre-competitive routines, pre-training routines, getting prepared mentally and physically. It's a very powerful tool. Self-talk. Again, the research on self-talk is just out of this world. Henry Ford, the inventor of cars, at least from the American perspective, said, if you think you can do something or you don't think you can do something, you're right. Because we rise and fall to the level of what we believe we're capable of. And yet we're wired to focus on the negative. And this is an evolutionary thing. And we can get into a whole, it's in many respects very much of an evolutionary psychologist because we're these highly evolved beings with this motor cortex and this prefrontal cortex. But most of the time we react to the world like we're still animals. Survival instinct, fight or flight, et cetera, et cetera. Whole nother conversation.
So how easy is it? I'm just thinking of someone who maybe doesn't have that mental resilience when they come to you and who doesn't think they can make it. Yes, they are physically fit and good at the sport, but have a issue with their own, I guess, self-doubt and anxiety. How just telling them that to say to themselves that they're good, that they can do it. It sounds like that's not going to be enough. And they might even reject that as a strategy because they go, oh, what difference is that going to make? Okay. How do you break through that?
Yeah. So there are two ways. One is think of when you go into the gym. To get stronger, if you just do 3 reps, you're not going to get stronger. But if you do 20 reps and you do that 5 times a week, that adds up. And so it's retraining the brain. And this is not just thoughts. Self-talk is grounded, obviously, in neurophysiology of our brain. So we rewire the brain. And is it easy? No. But becoming the best athlete you can be is not easy either. Nothing in life that's of value is easy. But if you do it enough, it can turn around. You retrain your mind in a positive way. Plus, it's not just the talk. You combine it with success in the sport, with support and encouragement from coaches, with getting your physiology involved. Because our mind and our body are constantly talking to each other. So if I'm really bummed out, what's my body going to be saying? Like this, sort of all down. And you can't think and feel ways that are inconsistent with what your body is telling you. So it's I call it walk strong, like
okay.
Shoulder back. You can't think, oh, I suck, I'm terrible, I'm going to do really bad today. When chin is up, shoulders are back, chest is out.
I was thinking about we're talking about physical sports here, and you might tell me I'm going off at a funny angle, but there are sports which are not physical. The mental sports, for instance, chess probably being the most mental sport. So you don't have that physical power, but you have that mental power. Do the techniques for mental training still work in that area, and are they still as important?
Yes, absolutely. And one thing you've seen with the rising chess stars is they are all incredibly physically fit.
Okay.
Yeah, because they realize that chess is an endurance sport. And it's physically demanding to be thinking. And there's a lot of research on cognitive efficiency and cognitive fatigue that your mind gets tired. And so if your body's fit, the mind is not this separate entity floating in space. it's a physical organ. So if your body's in shape, your mind is going to be more in shape too. Also, amazingly enough, just in the last year or two, I've been working with mathletes.
Yes, I've heard of that. Tell me more.
Yeah. So these are kids who compete in math competitions. And it's all the same stuff. And I still, I have them get working out and eating well because our brain needs fuel, for example. And these math competitions can be 3 hours, 4 hours long, and halfway through they're cooked because they're just out of fuel, out of mental fuel. So, I'm not a nutritionist, but I bring in that aspect as well, because if you're not properly fueled in sport or in math or chess, the brain's not going to work. It needs its fuel. So if we can continue on this path, this is, I think, where it starts to get interesting. I basically take two paths in my work. One is mental training, and that's the things I've talked to you about, using mental exercises and mental tools like imagery, like self-talk, like intensity control, like focusing tools, all really important. But again, with this athlete I talked about, the Olympic gold medalist, she wouldn't be one of the top athletes in the world unless she was pretty darn good at it. But pretty darn good is not going to get you to be the best in the world. You have to be really good at it. You can't just be pretty strong or pretty good technically. You need to be unbelievably. And that's those margins. At this level, we're talking about such small margins where races are won by tenths of seconds. But then the other path is deeper. And the metaphor I use is a horse. I'm not an equestrian by any means. I've ridden horses a number of times in my life, but this metaphor came to me. You're riding a horse. And how do you get a horse to run fast? Well, first it has to be trained like a thoroughbred, a racehorse. You have to train it. It has to have good genes, of course. And that's why the whole mating thing with the horses, breeding, is a big deal. You have to have good genes. You have to train it so it's capable of running fast. But also, you have to look at what is holding it back. And where the metaphor gets interesting is that for an athlete, they're both the horse and the rider. So what's one way to ensure that your horse, metaphorically or literally, won't run fast? You pull back on the reins.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a part of our minds, our unconscious mind, that typically pulls back on the reins. Because no matter how capable that horse, that thoroughbred is capable of running, it's not going to run fast if you're pulling back on the reins. So what I found is that there are certain attitudes and emotions that basically set athletes up for failure. So before they even begin the competition, game over. And so this is where in my work I go deep. Now, I don't do psychoanalysis, but I explore the unconscious, because there are 3 unconscious forces that pretty much uniformly hurt us. And again, this is a life thing. Can be with relationships, with work. The first is evolution. So survival instinct. The primitive brain is not very smart. It's not smart at all. It only knows one thing: death. Avoid death. That's it. Avoid death. That's all. And we've spent the last 250 million years ensuring that we're really good at that. But that doesn't work in modern day sports or society. Fighting or fleeing, whether it's your boss gives you a bad review, running away doesn't help, and jumping over the desk and attacking your boss doesn't help either. Same with relationships, partners, things like that, family, kids, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but when an athlete goes to perform in their sport, they experience what's called in sports psychology anticipatory arousal, which I hate that phrase, because when you use that phrase, when you talk about arousal with kids, what's the first thing they think about, Paul?
Yeah, they start giggling.
Exactly. They start giggling, precisely. So, but nonetheless, you feel your intensity increase, and that can reach anxiety. That is your primitive brain perceiving the situation as a threat to your life. Now, yes, in some cases, in some sports, people die. But for the most part, most sports, you're not going to die. You're not going to die on the golf course unless you get hit by a bolt of lightning, I suppose. You're not going to get hit you're not going to die on the soccer pitch or the tennis court or what have you. So it's not about physical life. It's about psychological life, self-identity, self-esteem, attachment to your goals.
Yes.
This part of my work is about letting go of the reins. Not completely. You need to maintain control of the horse, but enough so it can run fast. So some of the obstacles, some of the attitudes I see that are harmful are overinvestment. where your self-esteem, your self-identity is too attached to your results, such that when you go to the line to perform, your
Yeah.
life is on the line. Your life is
Yeah.
threatened. Now, again, psychological life, not physical life, but your primitive brain, your amygdala, doesn't know the difference. Let's see. Perfectionism. Perfectionism is a double-edged sword because it drives people maniacally to become successful. The problem with being a perfectionist is you rarely can ever experience true success, because to experience true success, you need to take risks. But the inherent aspect of a risk is it doesn't always work out. And if you are more focused on the fear of not being perfect, you're not going to take those risks. The third is fear of failure. The number one reason why parents send their kids to me. They don't know that's why they're sending their kids to me, but that is the heart of the issue. And we live in a culture, an achievement culture, massive fear of failure. It's epidemic in our culture, because it used to be, if you got a B, I'm solid. If I was eighth, solid. Now, if you don't get I've had kids say, I got an A minus, I was devastated. Or I finished third, I was devastated.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother conversation.
That's the whole sort of mindset almost from Carol Dweck, isn't it? That I've experienced a failure, therefore I am a failure.
Exactly. Right. And that ties with the overinvestment. It's not a failure of the situation. It's a failure of the self. It's a personal attack on my value as a person. Let's see what else. Preoccupation with results. I totally support the fact that results matter. If you hear anybody say results don't matter, they don't live in the real world. Because you don't get ahead in the world by working hard, although that's necessary. You don't get ahead in the world by being nice, although that may or may not help. You get ahead in the world, it's a meritocracy, by producing results, and you climb the food chain, whether it's to the Premier League in soccer, or to Carnegie Hall, or winning the Nobel Peace Prize, whatever.
Do you ever get any resistance from people who come to you? And I'm thinking for the things that you've just said there, if you tell someone to stop being preoccupied with results, I can imagine a very competitive person telling you, Jim, I can't do that.
No, and I never say that. And here's a metaphor that I use, is forks in the road. So focusing on results, being preoccupied with the results, trying to be perfect, being more afraid of failure than pursuing success. That's the bad road. But Paul, nobody chooses to go down the bad road. And that's where the unconscious forces come in. But the reason why a lot of people keep going down the bad road is not only is it habitual, they don't see an exit. Imagine you're driving down the road and there's no highway and you don't have a monster truck, so you can't go off road. You're going to stay on that road even though you know it's not a good road. And so a big part of what I do is show them there is a good road. There is a fork in the road. You don't have to go down the bad road. And they go, oh, there's a good road. Wow, I want to do that. But the way I put it, it's a simple but not easy choice. It's simple, Paul. Would you rather go down the bad road or the good road? Duh. Of course you're going to want to go down the good road. But all those unconscious forces are pulling you down the bad road. It takes a tremendous amount of strength, a tremendous amount of effort to finally take the good road.
Do you find that the athletes that you work with do easily transfer the lessons that you give them into other areas of their life? Or do you have to open that door as well?
Well, I have to make them aware of it, that yes, that I say right from the start, this isn't tennis or soccer or ski racing psychology. This is not even sports psychology. This isn't even psychology. This is life. And you can apply it to any aspect of your life. And one of the most gratifying things, again, I've been doing this for a long time. I'll have people that I worked with in their teens, and now they're in their 30s, and they go, I still use this stuff in my work. So it's not really about greatness. It's about your own personal greatness.
Yes. And one of the things that's coming into my mind, and this might be a bit challenging, so please tell me to get back in my box if it is, but it's just coming to my mind again from the area of psychology that's involved with the thought about the mind-body connection and how important that connection is, and how people often forget that crucial aspect is the idea of placebos. Now, placebos are always fascinating for people because they are nothing, and yet they can have an effect on people. Yeah, one study that comes to mind because it's relevant to sport and actually cycling was one by a chap called Christopher Beattie in 2006, where he took a group of very experienced cyclists and he told them that they were testing the effects of different doses of caffeine on the performance in a time trial. And in reality, On some of the trials, the cyclists were just given a sugar pill, a placebo, and nothing. But they were told that they received that very potent dose of performance-enhancing caffeine. Now, the interesting thing was, as placebos are like this, the cyclists who believed they had taken the caffeine produced significantly more power than those who didn't, and they completed the time trial faster as well. And I think another aspect I remember as well is that their performance often scaled with the expected dose that they were given. So cyclists rode faster when they thought they had more caffeine versus a small dose of caffeine, and they actually changed their performance within that as well, even though they were having nothing at all. Now, I love that, as I said, because it just highlights that mind-body connection and the power of belief. But with placebos, it's a lie. That psychologist was tricking those cyclists into thinking one thing when they had another. How do you ethically harness that power of belief? And ritual, I suppose, is a big part of it, to help, I guess, athletes build that genuine and sustainable confidence over time.
Yeah. So the ultimate determination of confidence is success.
Yeah.
And so you can do all the positive self-talk and the preparations and the routines and getting support from others. But if you don't have success, that's not going to be resilient confidence. And I know this research, and there's another study where they actually lied to people, cyclists, telling them that they were going slower following an avatar on a screen, when in fact,
Yes.
the avatar was going the same speed. And so again, it goes to the power of, if you believe a situation, that impacts you physiologically. And so ultimately, for confidence to be sustained and resilient to setbacks, it has to be grounded in reality. Because otherwise, it's just like, I'm just BSing myself. And so you need that. But you first need to change the direction of the confidence. Instead of this vicious cycle, turn it into an upward spiral where it's like, yeah, I believe you can do this. And for example, a coach saying that to an athlete, that is massive, because the athlete can't generate that themselves. So it's like the coach is giving them a piece of their confidence in them. Now, does that mean they're all of a sudden crushing it? No. But that little bit of confidence results in an improvement in performance. And that's that success. And they go like, oh, wow, I didn't think that was possible. And then their belief gets a little stronger. And then they have a little more success, and so on and so forth, until their confidence is high. And it's grounded not only in the effort they put into it, but also in terms of being more positive and gaining more confidence, but also the world is validating those perceptions. And you absolutely need that. That's the real world.
Yeah. And I find that fascinating, because every time you're sort of talking there, I'm thinking again of that reinforcement theory and self-identity. The reinforcement you get after performing an action that helps you to feel, I am the type of person that does this. It might be, I am the type of person who is confident. I am the type of person who goes forward and wins. And that strengthens that. And when it happens once more, you get that second reinforcement and you get better again. Now, that is such a strong theory, isn't it? And I love being able to see it in practice with what you're talking about. Another aspect, though, I'm interested in is pressure. Being a sports professional is pressure. Performing in front of other people. But it's also, I think, something even non-sports people like me feel, because when I have to go and speak at a conference and I'm speaking in front of 1,000 people, that's pressure.
Same stuff.
And it's very different performing in my room to myself than it is stood up on a stage performing to somebody else. What's happening, I guess, psychologically and physiologically when an athlete chokes?
Yeah. So this is the holy grail of my work in a way, because another big reason why athletes come to me, or their parents send them to me if they're young, is they're performing great in training, but they can't translate that into competition. And this is actually a good sort of test of my effectiveness, I suppose, because if somebody's performing well in training, that means they're physically, technically, tactically capable of performing well. And so in theory, you should be able to translate that into competition. But what's the difference between the two? Training doesn't matter. Practice doesn't matter. The competition matters. And that changes your entire psychology. And that's where a lot of people struggle. And the great ones, they don't let that happen. It's because whether you're speaking in front of a group or you're competing in your sport, what's the threat? Because what's the pressure? The pressure is, I'm going to die. And it goes back to the primitive instincts, the survival instinct. And so a lot of my work is about letting go, recognizing that no matter what happens to you, you might lose miserably. You might not make it in your sport, or you might just do badly today. It's not life or death. You will be okay. Because in almost all cases, you are. But when you're about to go out there and perform, oh my gosh, I have to do well today, whether it's for my parents or to make the next level of a team or whatever it might be.
What about working with people around the athlete? I mean, we talked about working with the athlete themselves, but we mentioned the support with families, for instance, and I know that you work with parents of young athletes as well. What's the biggest mistake parents make in trying to support their children?
Oh, caring too much. Yeah. In my first parenting book from, I don't know, it was early 2000s, in the one chapter, I make it very simple. And this is my advice to parents. And in the book, it's highlighted, it's capitalized, highlighted, italicized, bolded, and 3 exclamation points after. 3 words: get a life. Because we live in this insanely toxic youth sport achievement culture. Kids know that it's important, and even though it's not, it's just sports. But that parents become the weight vest, or even worse, they climb on their back. And it's like, if parents are that invested in their kids, and I've seen this before, then where their happiness is on the shoulders of the kids, that's a crushing burden. So it's like, get a life of your own. If you're putting your self-esteem, your value as a person on your kids, get a life. Find something of your own that you can own that brings you meaning, satisfaction, and joy.
Yes.
So the bottom line with all this is, I don't want to swear here, although I tend to. I have this thing called the F it attitude. And you can figure out what the F stands for. It's just like, the basic idea is like, you're not saying F it to your sport. Because if you say F it to your sport, like, why do it? You're saying F it to the outcome. And when you do that, you liberate yourself. There's nothing holding you back, because the only thing that holds you back is fear of failure, being judged. And that ties in again, self-identity, self-esteem. So if you can make you need to be invested, but not too invested. And
that's a difficult balance though, isn't it? Because one side, you need discipline. You've got to have discipline to be an excel at any sport, but to have that F it attitude as well, to say it doesn't matter, it almost feels contradictory.
No, I didn't say it doesn't matter. I say, ultimately, all you can do is give it everything you've got, and result come what may. And again, the paradox here is, if you do get everything you got, you're more likely to get the results you want. And it's your only chance of getting to the top, or let's even say to getting as far as you can. Yes, it's hard, but again, kids are. You talked about the support around kids, coaches, sports programs, teammates, parents, the broader youth sport culture, all sending often bad messages. And we are victims of our culture, or beneficiaries of our culture. And so if we're in a culture that's all about results, it's nearly impossible to think otherwise. And a lot of times that's an uphill battle I fight with the kids I work with, because I know that it's unhealthy and it doesn't work. That's the amazing thing. It doesn't work. And the more I can educate coaches and parents, the more they get on the side of the kids.
Would you also transfer your idea of that get a life mentality onto the kids as well? And I'll share an anecdote which made me think of it. I went to school with a hockey player, and she was young, but a very talented hockey player. And it was lucky because our school had a good women's hockey team. And so she was selected for the England under somethings. And then she did finally leave school, go and train properly. She went to the Olympics and played for England at hockey. So absolute top level hockey player. Now, I bumped into her later in life, I think around 30. And I said to her, what your life must have been fantastic. You've gone all over the world playing the sport you love, which you've done since early age. And she said yes. She definitely didn't think it was a bad life. However, she said, I missed out on so much life because she didn't come to the pub with us like we did, at school when we first could go to the pub. She didn't come to the discos with us because she had to be up at 3 a.m. to do training or go to a different part of the country and play hockey. So she missed out on so much of her life that later in life and again, I'm not going to use the word regret, but she does look back on it thinking, what did I miss out on? So that get a life, could it be something actually you'd say to the individual athlete as well, without compromising actually their attitude towards being the best that they can be?
Yeah, that's a tough one because an athlete like that, or the professional and Olympic athletes I work with, they're making a choice to live a life, to go on a path less traveled, and that's a choice. There are benefits and costs, and you accept the costs and you focus on the benefits, or you leave the sport. And certainly athletes do that. I have 2 daughters who are on the same ski racing path as I was on, and they realized that they wanted a more robust, a more traditional high school experience, so they left the sport. And what's interesting is one of my daughters is in college now, and after 4 years away from ski racing, she's racing again for the college team.
Okay.
And so she's reconnected with it in a situation where she can enjoy it, where it's not her life, just her life. She's able to have a normal college experience, but still do something she's always loved. And so, this is what you're really getting at, is the issue of balance.
And I think the reason I'm interested in all this, as I said at the beginning, isn't because I'm a keen cyclist or rugby player or soccer player, but I am interested in how it can be transferred into life. Now, I think everything you've been talking about, everyone listening should be going, I see. But let's be a little bit more specific. I think everyone knows exercise is good for your mental health, of course. But from your perspective, what is it about that structure and discipline of sport, I suppose, that can be so therapeutic for managing conditions such as anxiety?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a whole body of research on the value of exercise in terms of treating clinical anxiety, clinical depression, because it changes your physiology. And depression and anxiety are fundamentally neurophysiological and physiological experiences. But
Yes.
at the same time, in terms of just achieving in other aspects of your life, thinking about, here's a good example. So I was working with a world-class athlete in a sport who was getting ready to retire. And he said, I have no skills. Like, what am I going to do out there in the real world? I have no skills. And I go, well, are you motivated? Yes. Are you disciplined? Yes. Do you know how to deal with frustration? Yes. Can you overcome setbacks? Yes. So maybe he's not going to be a brain surgeon, but for most areas that don't take highly specialized training, those are the qualities that make you successful. And so
It sounds very similar to people coming out of the military who often say the same thing. I can't do anything but the military. And then you talk about transference of the skills that they have, and they go, oh, yeah. And often military personnel coming into the civilian world do very well and very successful.
yeah, for sure. And so, but a lot of athletes don't think that, because their self-identity is all around, I'm an athlete. And they retire, then who am I? But they're still people with capabilities, with skill sets, with experiences that translate directly into so many aspects of life.
So let's get practical. Can we give some tips, I suppose, to people who might be business leaders, entrepreneurs, people who do not identify themselves as elite athletes, but they are definitely doing things where they're under pressure, they wish to perform, and they want to be the best they can be. How can the mental routine of a pre-race cyclist be adapted to a pre-boardroom routine, I guess, for someone about to enter a high-pressure meeting? What would you suggest that they do?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the same stuff. Developing a pre-competitive or a pre-board. I have to present to my board, for example, and I work with high-level executives, C-suite people, and we talk about all the same stuff, because you're going into an environment in which you could fail. You might lose your job, whatever, and so you need to be prepared, and you need to be prepared physically in terms of a good night's sleep. a healthy breakfast if it's a morning meeting. You need to be positive about it. You don't want to be going in like they're going to just kill me. You need to be well prepared in terms of what you're going to be talking about. So just like your game plan in a sport, you need to have your game plan. You need to rehearse your game plan. If you're giving a presentation with the deck, and
Yes.
you need to make sure the deck is really good and compelling, and you need to make sure you know it. Because in a boardroom, you need to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about, that you're competent, that you can do the job that the board of trustees are paying you to do. So again, it seems kind of weird for people, but the same thing that you do with athletes getting ready for an Olympics or a World Cup soccer match or whatever it might be. Same thing in terms of giving a presentation at work, and you might just be a salesperson. This is not just C-suite people presenting to the board. I've worked with surgical teams. Talk about a team sport.
Yeah.
And you know,
And talk about pressured. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, a soccer game, if you lose, it's like, okay, but if you lose the patient in an OR.
Well, let's stick with the boardroom for now as an example. What if that person creates the mental imagery, self-talks themselves, goes in, does the best they can do, but doesn't win the pitch, doesn't succeed, and so they think they failed. Despite everything that they've done, they failed. What would you say to them?
Yeah, feel bad, especially in a situation like that. It didn't go well. And for example, I pitched to an investor group about 2 or 3 months ago, and I failed miserably. This is for Mindto, for investors
Yes.
for Mindto. I failed miserably, and I felt bad because I did my research. I was as prepared as I could be, but I didn't know what it was like going in and being asked questions and having 10 minutes to present the company. And yeah, I was bummed out, but same with my training. I have bad I'm a very serious age group triathlete now, and I just got back from the World Championships in Australia, and so I'm very serious about it. And so I I have bad races. Last year at the World Championships, I had 2 bad races, and it was like, yeah, I was bummed because aside from my work and my family, that's all I do and all I care about. And but the problem with me doing what I do for a living is I have to practice what I preach. And so I used a lot of the same stuff where it's like, okay, yeah, things didn't go well. Now, first, why didn't they go? Well, first of all, I allowed myself to feel like crap. And then after that, I lasted a day or two, and it's like, okay, what went wrong? And I sat down with my coach and I said, what's going on here? Why did this happen? And we figured it out. And we then, because you can't change the past, but we can understand, because if those who don't understand, learn from the past, are bound to repeat it. So now what do I do to prevent that from happening again? And so this year at the World Championships, I made all these changes and I crushed it. I had a great 2 races.
Brilliant. There you go. Yeah.
And for this board person giving a presentation, okay, what do I need to do next time? And so you use them as lessons. As I said earlier, unfortunate aspect of life lessons, they tend to be very unpleasant. And
so it's fine to let yourself feel bad for a certain amount of time before going into the debrief. Debrief yourself what went wrong. But to start with, and I think a lot of people don't, they think, I can't feel bad. I can't actually do this. So they ignore it. But you say, don't do that.
Right. No, because think of it this way. Just like positive emotions encourage us to pursue the things that led to those positive emotions, the purpose of negative emotions is to ensure that we avoid those situations that cause those negative emotions. Like fear, if we're afraid of something, we run away. So when we're in that situation again, good idea to run away. So we learn. And so it's like, I don't want to feel that bad again. So what do I need to do to turn that around? And also, we live in a culture, sort of broadly speaking, that emotions are signs of weakness. And yet
Yes.
they are the ultimate fuel. With my high-level athletes, yes, I do mental training because even though they're really good mentally, there are ways to sharpen it. But ultimately, the emotions are what's going to enable them to ultimately reach their goals. So, for example, if you're afraid of failure, if you are afraid of not being perfect, that's fear is driving you. That's holding the reins. So this with this athlete who won the gold medal, she was from a country that the culture is not of emotionality, and from a family that not a lot of emotionality. And so we're still, this is a work in progress, but we're working on getting her to feel deeply.
Yes.
And why don't we like to feel deeply? Because we're afraid of feeling bad. And yet we can't choose, we can't cherry pick our emotions. Oh, I'm just going to feel the love and joy and inspiration. It's two sides of the same coin. You can't feel the good emotions if you don't allow yourself to feel the bad emotions.
Yeah. I think before we wrap up, I just want to talk to you about the new venture that you've got called Mindto. What is it, and what's your goal for creating it?
Yeah. So I have created a ton of intellectual property over the years, just my knowledge base, what I know. And I have a boutique consulting practice where I work with no more than maybe 10 or 12 people. And I'm able to have such a small practice because I will pat myself on the back. I charge extraordinarily high fees, but,
Reassuringly high. Yes.
but the market has told me I have that value, the free market system anyway, but I'm driven. My purpose and passion in life is to create and to have an impact. And so I've been wanting to have develop an app for a number of years, but it's really complicated. And these two young guys, approached me at the beginning of 2024. Sorry, not 2020, 2024, and said we have this idea. And they tried to do it on their own, and they didn't have any content expertise. And so they said, would you come on board? And so I came on as a co-founder, and I'm chief content officer. And the app is about developing. It's an app to provide ways to, like I said earlier, meet athletes where they are. Like,
Yes.
the hardest part for youth sports programs, for professional teams, for college programs is how to convey valuable information. So we're going to start beta testing next week. And the idea is where a sports team, for example, might have a mental coach or sports psychologist involved, probably doesn't. But the coaches and the athletes can go onto the app, and we have what I call the roadmap. And I use this metaphor of journeys. And journeys are basically like mini courses of like total of 25 minutes or so with mini lessons of 3 to 5 minutes. Because the research shows that 3 to 6 minutes is the sweet spot for keeping people's attention. And so for the last year and a half, I've been in charge of creating the content in using the latest research, the latest technology to figure out how best to reach young athletes, and not just young, but all level of athletes. And so the app is called Mindto. The website is mindto.io, and that gives you an explanation. But it's been a way where I can scale myself, basically, where I can upload myself. I can upload myself to the matrix, if you will. And it's not just me. We've got other experts bringing content as well. But I think we've created. We have this massive library of journeys of these mini courses. We got like 170 that cover everything from sports mental performance in sport to well-being to mental health. And the goal ultimately is to roll this out to where we can create content for corporations or just life.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like we've been chatting about. It can expand beyond the athletes to become the business people.
Right. Yes. And just people who want to be better. And because, the self-help market is massive. It's a multi-billion-dollar market, but nobody's figured out how to have a real impact.
Yeah, well, I wish you the best of luck with it. It sounds really magnificent. And it's mindto.io, and I'll put the link in the show notes if anyone wants to go and click that and have a look. Before we go, I just wanted to mention your book, which is behind me. So this is the book that I got caught reading, and one of my friends went, "What are you doing?" It's a complete guide to cycling psychology, and you wrote this with cycling legend Mark Beaumont as well. Now, if your app is anything as good as this, then you're onto a winner. Because I'm just going to, you're humble. I'm going to shout about this a little bit because Christmas is just around the corner. I think this book is such a great present because I am not joking. This is one of the nicest looking books in the whole of my collection of books. It's beautiful. The photography in it is wonderful. The feel of the book is great. And how it alternates between Mark's anecdotes and stories behind the scenes of him cycling, and then you coming in with the psychology of moving on, and you outline the mental training and the unconscious things that people need to be aware of. I think it's absolutely a stunning book, and I've got it and I'm not a cyclist. So there you are. I think that's the endorsement that I'm going to give for that one. It couldn't be any better.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate the blatant commercialism there for on my behalf. So thank you for that.
I don't do it on every podcast, I tell you that. A lot of the time, but that is a really good book.
No, I appreciate that. And it was a wonderful experience. And Mark and I have become great friends. And the publisher did, yes, visually, it's a beautifully engaging book. For those who want something a little broader, my other book, Train Your Mind for Athletic Success, is written for all athletes and all people. And if they go to my website, drjimtaylor.com, I list all my books there as well. And again, I don't need to sell books. It's just if it's of interest. But more than anything for me is just, if you want to grow, if you want to become the person you think you're capable of becoming, in any form, just find a way to get on that road and begin the journey. And because there's no one road to Rome. There are all kinds of ways. There's seminars, there's counseling, there's coaching, there's reading, there's apps. There are YouTube channels. TikTok, I'm not sure you can change your world from there, but who knows?
Well, yeah, some people do.
I guess so. You're right. But the main thing is just like, I think one of the great lessons for me in this past year, working at particularly with this one incredible young woman athlete, the gold medalist, as well as just my own triathlon experience, as well as my work with Mindto, is just, you never know what's possible until you put yourself out there. And then it's like then it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was possible. But then all of a sudden it's possible, and it changes your world. Like all of a sudden this gold medalist who's now world champion, she's like, she was unimaginable before. And if you can't imagine it, you can't believe it. And if you don't believe it, this takes us back to the very beginning of our conversation. Whatever you think you can do, you don't think you can do, you're right. You're not going to pursue it. So just open this idea, like we haven't reached what we're capable of. And the only way to find that out is to just put yourself out there, take the shot, risk failure, and good things will happen. Like I use this expression a lot. Good things will happen, because I can't say you'll win a gold medal or you'll play for Man U or whatever. But whatever your capabilities are, you will maximize those capabilities and you will become the best you can be. And
Brilliant.
that is a victory. That's the victory in the end.
Yes. What a great way to end. I think people listening to this, hopefully you might have come for the sport and you've come away at the other end thinking, actually, I can apply this to lots of other areas of my life. Thank you so much, Jim, for coming on. Great pleasure. It's been wonderful chatting with you. Again, I just love talking with people who are passionate about what I do, and yet who have different experience than I do, different experiences. And so it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Paul. Super. And people, you can learn more by going to drjimtaylor.com, finding out all about Jim. You've got so much information on your website about the work you do and the techniques there. So that's great. And obviously visit mindto.io as well. Thank you very much. Until next week. See you then.